I do apologize. Well, I'm not really apologizing in a way, but you might have experienced two different types of coffee when you came in here this morning. It's been a morning. It's 10:54. It's been a morning. I'm having a nap this afternoon. Coffee machines didn't work this morning. I almost had to cancel church. So we'll get that figured out, but in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed your treat today. You just post on your Instagram story that we had Starbucks in church today. Everyone will be here next week. And Tim Hortons for all you heathens, too. My heart is full this morning, just being able to share that with you. And we've been praying that would be our experience. And when we say things like, welcome home, and we're so glad you're here, we want you to feel the close-knitness and the love that exists within our community. But more than anything, our prayer is that you would experience God's presence. God's presence just changes everything. It's ready to come here and see friendly faces and smiles, and today have good coffee and different things. It makes all the difference when we have tangible experiences of God's presence like that. So thank you this morning for entering in. And thank you for embracing the slowness of worship this morning. Thank you, Paul, for being sensitive to that. I don't even need to preach today because that's what I was going to preach about. Truthfully, I'll still preach. I mean, what am I saying? But truthfully, that is what it's all about. I had a fancy introduction. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to skip down. We've been in this series called I'm So Tired. And I want to look at one last thing today that is sort of the reason underneath the surface as to why we feel so tired all the time. And that is our lack of presence or our inability to be present to ourselves, to our lives, to the people around us. And the thing we're going to look at today is this concept, this idea of slowing down, which is what we've done for the last 50 minutes. So that's beautiful. If you came here between 8 and 10 a.m. this morning, I tell you, this place wasn't slowed down. We were running around, coffee machines, things not working, but it's good to slow. I actually joked with Paul saying that once the worship set was done, I was just going to go meditate in the corner by myself for a couple minutes to get ready for this, because it was just one of those mornings. And so we've looked at a couple different practices over the last couple of weeks in terms of how to sort of combat this soul fatigue and tiredness that we feel in our lives. We've looked at silence and solitude. We've looked at Sabbath, this idea of taking one day every 7 to rest and worship with God and with others. Last week we talked about simplicity, and this week we're talking about slowing. And I want to start in Luke chapter 5. You can probably skip ahead to slides 5 or 6. Luke chapter 5. And it says this about Jesus. This is one of the things. This is all grounded in the person of Jesus today. It says there's this moment in Jesus' ministry early on. It says all the news spread about him all the more, so that crowds came to hear him and be healed of their sicknesses. So picture this moment, and if you read the Gospels, you'll know that in Jesus' life, crowds, and as I said a couple weeks ago, my grandmother would say, droves of people would come to be near Jesus. And he was teaching people, and he was healing people. And of course, that sort of can draw a crowd. All these people right now, there's this thing going on at Asbury University. And crowds or people are coming to experience something that they know they can't experience anywhere else. I believe this morning, I hope it's just not the way I'm feeling, but the presence of God has this thing that draws us closer, that draws us near. But it says this. I think this is always important to note because he was Jesus, fully God, fully man. I don't think he really needed downtime. I don't think he needed the rest. I don't think he needed these things. But it says in verse 16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So that's one moment. I want to look at a second moment. It's in Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5, verses 21. We're going to read to verse 36, going to break it up a bit. But it's this story in Mark chapter 5 that really shows this moment, this painfully annoying moment where Jesus, although so busy and has so much to do and so many people to heal, he slows down and he's present in the moment. Here's the moment. It says this in Mark chapter 5, verse 21. And when Jesus had crossed again into the boat to the other side, here it is again, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be well and live. And he went with him, and a great crowd followed him, and I love this word for some reason, thronged about him. This great crowd in this great moment where this ruler of the synagogue comes to Jesus knowing that his daughter, who is about 12 years old, is at the point of death. She's sick. She's ill. And as he comes to Jesus in a crowd, it says a crowd followed him, but something else happens in this moment. I'm adding H's and dropping H's like I did last week. I always made fun of my mother. I knew it was going to come back to bite me. I knew it. Here's what happens. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. She's been bleeding the same amount of years as this daughter has been alive. 12 years. My Fitbit's telling me I got 10,000 steps already today. That's amazing. I'm sorry. Who had suffered much under many physicians, doctors, and had spent... I'm having a hard time seeing this. Maybe I'm dropping my H's. I'm having a hard time seeing. I'm getting old. Paul said that song was old just a couple minutes ago. You know how old that song is? 27 years old. First time in my life I've been called old. I'm 27, by the way, in case you didn't get that. She spent all that she had, and she was no better, but she grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd, and she touched his garment. She touched his garment. She touched him. She touched his clothes. And Jesus said to his disciples, Jesus asked his disciples, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? Now there's a great crowd in this moment following Jesus. So I kind of envision this if you're sort of at like a concert or something, and there's crowds of people around you, and you can't tell who's touching you and who's not touching you. It's just sort of a mosh pit kind of scene. And Jesus stops and says, who touched my garment? Not because he felt someone touch his shirt, but because he says he perceived the power leave his body. And his disciples in verse 31, they kind of laugh. They say, you see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, who touched me? I want to stop there for a moment because this is an interesting story. At the beginning of the story, we have this temple synagogue ruler whose daughter is at the point of death on her deathbed, and Jesus is on the way to her when this sort of happens. And yet Jesus takes a moment as someone is on their deathbed to have this interaction. He already healed her. The power had already left. He had already healed her. He didn't need to stop. I don't know why he stopped. But can you imagine Jairus in this moment? If it was your daughter or your son or your friend or your mother or your father on their deathbed, Jesus is coming. He's the one who can heal this and change this and do something about this. But he stops because someone touched him in the midst of a loud, big crowd. I can't imagine how Jairus is feeling in this moment. He stops and he says to her, he looks around to see who had done it. No one comes forward but this woman, knowing that what had happened. She came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed. Be healed of your disease. It sort of pauses there for a moment. I'm like, what about Jairus' daughter? What? Like, that's what this story, that's how it started. That's what it's, what is going on? And while he was still speaking, it says in verse 35, there came from the ruler's house some who said, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, do not fear, only believe. Now, I'm not going to finish reading this story, but Jesus ends up going there, brings her back to life. He says she's only been sleeping. He wakes her up. There's this amazing, amazing miracle. And I'm not going to exegete the passage or anything like that, other than to sort of illustrate and just touch on this point. How frustrating it would be, and how frustrating it is, when you are asking God for something and you're seeing him do something else in all of the people's lives around you. How frustrating it is when you feel like you had his attention at first, but then it seems like you've lost him along the way. And your faith is hanging in the balance as he's ministering to someone else's faith and journey. But Jesus illustrates this amazing ability to be present in the moment, to stop when he had no reason to stop. She had already been healed, to stop and be present in the moment. You see, Jesus, here's the thing about Jesus. He was so present and so committed to people that he stopped to honor this woman's faith even when someone else's faith hung in the balance. Someone else's daughter was at the point of death. This is just one of those stories where this happens. But what does Jesus demonstrate? Jesus demonstrates that he's present. He's present. Read the rest of the Gospels. Read, through the story of Jesus, the life of Jesus. We see this amazing thing that Jesus is always present. I want to stop and just offer a side note as it relates to that story. Maybe you're here today and you feel like God is at work in everyone else's life besides yours. I want to just repeat that sort of promise that Jesus gives to the jailer, or the ruler in this moment. Do not fear, only believe. God is with you. He's in your life. He's in your story. Even when he feels like he's absent, or he's going to be late, or it's too late for him to come, he is present and he is in your story. I just want to offer that as a side note today. But I want to speak to us for a moment, because if we're going to be a church that, as I said, and as we always say, that welcomes people home, if we're going to be a church that creates places of encounter for people to explore faith in Jesus, if we're going to be a church that's committed to community and one another and growing together on purpose, as we often say, if we're going to be a church that commits itself to values like hospitality, which is more than good coffee one Sunday a year when our coffee machines don't work. If we're going to commit ourselves to values such as generosity, discipleship, growing our journey of faith to be like Jesus, become like Jesus, and do what he would do if he were you and I, then it starts here. We need to be present with ourselves, with one another, with God. To stop and notice that person that needs encouragement today. To stop and notice that person that might be new to church and they arrive early. That's how you know someone's new. They come early and the rest of you are all late. And you go and speak to that person. You're present. To stop and notice that person that might need financial help today. To stop and notice that person that is wanting you to ask them, for you to invite them to come to your church or to try Alpha. To be present and to know and be sensitive to the Holy Spirit as when he's directing you in your life, in your conversations. To stop and notice your son or daughter or mother or father carrying the weight of the world, just hoping for you to ask, how are you doing? How are you doing? Do you want to talk about it? How are you doing? Noticing that you've been a little off lately. How are you doing? And the last thing is this, to stop and notice God's presence in your own life, which, again, perfect illustration, Paul. Thanks for helping us do that this morning. You see, presence is such a gift. Presence allows us to see things we've never seen before. Presence allows us to be fully alive. Here's a shameless plug. Next week, we're starting a new series of messages called Fully Alive. We're going from I'm so tired to fully alive. Who came up with that? Sounds good, doesn't it? Yep. We're going to be journeying through the book of Ephesians, verse by verse, exploring what it means to be fully alive in Christ. Presence allows us to experience life in its depths. It allows us to be more rooted and less rushing from place to place. It allows us to be more whole and loving people. Presence allows us to live before we die. And the path to presence is slowing down. A couple weeks ago, I love how what this store in Edmonton is doing. They opened a slow line. You can go to the next slide. The purpose is that, you might have seen this in the news, the purpose is to give lonely people a place to be seen and heard. I see Pastor Sean tapping Pastor Jeremy on the leg right now, because Pastor Jeremy actually pointed us pastors to this. And I have in my notes this morning, the wide sage himself, Pastor Jeremy Nippard, shared this in a pastor's learning group I'm in, saying, here's what he says, when I saw this, all I could think of was the opportunity that's right in front of us. A slow lane for lonely people is so countercultural. It doesn't make money. No business owner in their right mind would do this, but I think Jesus would if he were the manager. Put it together. Put your hands together for Pastor Jeremy Nippard. He's loving this. He's hating this. I'm so tired. How do we slow down? First, I want to offer a definition, and then I'm going to give you a list of 20 things. It's going to be the most practical message ever, and somewhat annoying about how we can do this. I want you to hear this. You can go to the next slide. Here's what slowing is. Slowing is cultivating patience by deliberately choosing to place ourselves in positions where we simply have to wait. Slowing is cultivating patience. I'm already lost. By deliberately choosing to place ourselves in positions where we simply have to wait. When I read this, I thought that this is the wrong sort. I didn't think this was a definition of slowing. I thought it was a definition of torture. I'm just being honest this morning. Like, this sounds awful. Except I'm learning that as I slow down my body and I slow down my life, I become awake and alive to God and His presence. And that begins to change everything. John Marcomer says this: if we can slow down the pace at which we think and the pace in which we move through the world, maybe we can slow down our souls to the pace at which they can taste and see that the Lord is good and that the world is too. You see, you can't just really talk about being present. You sort of have to practice it. So here comes the list. And it might sound a little rulish, but at its heart, it's about structure, which is not a bad thing at all. Our lives in and with Jesus need structure so that we can ground ourselves in His practices, and more specifically, ground our calendars and our schedules to align with the values we claim we have as followers and apprentices of Him. Another John Marcomer quote says this: if our values are life with Jesus and growing in maturity towards love, joy, and peace, then our schedules, instead of practices that make up our days and weeks, are the ways we achieve inner peace. So here's the list. Are you ready? We'll be done after this, I promise. This list comes from John Mark's Homer book, which we've mentioned almost in every single message, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. So many of you have bought it. That chapter is sold out. So someone got the last copy. They let me know that. So I don't have any commission in this. I'm just saying it's a fantastic book. See, people are discussing already. Their burdens are being laid out as the list is just... I don't even need to... Let's just flick through this. I won't say a thing. I will promise that at the end we'll get a little more spiritual. But this is... all things are spiritual, believe it or not. All things contribute to our spiritual health and our spiritual lives in Christ. And these are just some of the everyday things that help us become more Christ-like. And we're starting behind the wheel, of course. Number 1, drive the speed limit. I fail already. Drive the speed limit. Don't drive below, or some of us will lose our salvation. But drive the speed limit. Notice how hard it is. Some of you drive the speed limit. That's cool. Just ignore this bit. But some of us, we don't drive the speed limit, and I won't point anyone out because I could get really in trouble, but someone who's sort of like my boss doesn't drive the speed limit. I'll say that. Paul Snow, I've seen him. He doesn't drive the speed limit. Okay, I'm going to stop because I'll get in trouble. I seen Paul. I was giving someone a ride to the airport one morning, and all I seen was this blue thing go by me, and I knew it was Paul. He was late to his flight, but I texted him after and just said, by the way, you're supposed to fly the plane, not fly on the way to the airport. But anyways, confession is at 3 o'clock. Okay. Drive the speed limit. Notice how hard that is. Number 2, this one goes right in line with this. Stay in the slow lane. Here's a promise. You'll begin to see things you've never noticed before. Number 3, come to a full stop at stop signs. Do you know what a full stop is? 3 seconds. Ready? You all don't stop. Don't stop like that, do you? It's hard, but it teaches us something to slow down. 3 seconds is long. We shouldn't even have to say this. Don't text and drive. It's crazy how that's become normal. It's normal. Number 5, show up early for church. We start at 10 o'clock, by the way. I was going to say show up early to appointments. Remember how you used to go in waiting rooms and there used to be things like magazines? or people, and you would talk to them? Let's try that again. Every waiting room can be a place of encounter. Just saying. Again, guilty. I use it to catch up on social media. But what if the waiting room was a place of encounter? Okay, we'll move on. I'm getting convicted. Number 6, get in the longest line at the store. Remember that definition that sounded a lot like torture? This is it. But it's a way to slow down our life and deal with the hurry in our souls. Here's the deeper motivation. John Marcomer, who can say it way more spiritually and godly than I can, he says, it's wise to regularly deny ourselves from getting what we want, whether through a practice as intense as fasting or as minor as picking the longest checkout line. That way, when someone else denies us from getting what we want, we don't respond with anger. We're overly acclimated. We don't have to get in the way. We don't have to get our way to be happy, which is very countercultural. Naturally, this takes a while for most of us, so start small, like at aisle 3. I said a couple weeks ago you shouldn't go to Costco on Sunday, but I'm going to change that today. That's what I do. Go to Costco today and get in the longest line. Work out your salvation with fear and trembling, Paul says. Number 7, these are a little fun. They involve these wonderful devices, which I always rant about, but I'm more addicted to it than anyone else. So turn your smartphone into a dumb phone. What do I mean by that? Delete email, delete social media, delete certain apps, turn off unnecessary notifications, and watch how you just gravitate to check that phone and check that email, and you feel as though something is missing in your lives because we're building lives on social media, not in the real world. Turn off the unnecessary notifications. Average person receives 46 notifications a day. Doesn't sound like a lot, but imagine if someone was ringing your doorbell 46 times a day. You'd call the cops. You'd call the cops. My dog would probably, I'm not going to finish that sentence. Here's a crazy idea. Turn it off throughout the day. Imagine turning off your phone when you were doing something important like working. Your employer says thank you. Or spending time at the dinner table. Going to a restaurant. Imagine turning it off. What a crazy... Leave it in the car. I wouldn't survive. What do we do without that? Number 9, parent your phone. What do we mean by that? Put it to bed before you go to bed? 7 p.m. is the best time of the day. Spoken as a parent of a toddler. And get up before your phone gets up. 75% of us, we fall asleep next to our phone. 90% of us, we check our phone before we use the washroom in the morning. So that's all I'm going to say on that. That's a stat. That's true. Notice how I get judgy on the ones I'm really good at? I charge my phone in the kitchen. It doesn't go in the room. But anyways, I'm really good at that one. Number 10, keep your phone off until you've cared for your soul. This one's a big one. I'm passionate about this one. Why are we so tired? When's the last time we've heard the voice of God? And how can we expect to hear the voice of God and experience His presence when we're looking at a post that's going to irritate us before we even ask Him to be with us on that day? Happened to me this morning. Don't know why. I got to find a different place other than the kitchen. Probably out in the garage, but I just had to walk by it. And if you have to walk by it, you just have to touch it to see if there's anything on it, because something crazy could have happened, like a Toronto Maple Leafs trade or anything whatsoever. And this morning I seen something that really, confessions at 3 o'clock, set my day off on a bad start. We let our cell phones and our notifications and Fox News and all the other things to set the emotional equilibrium of our day. And then we wonder why we're so agitated and irritated and angry with the world. It's because how did you start your day? If you're starting with Fox News or Facebook, you're probably going to be angry. That's what happens. I rant on these things. Number 11, set boundaries on things like email, phone, TV. A University of California study found that after each interruption, after each notification, it takes the person about 23 minutes to refocus. It won't be long wasting your entire day if that's true. The morning I wrote this message, by 9:42, I had received 11 emails just from random stores with this year, Black Friday was a month long. It was pre-Black Friday, pre-Black Friday, the week before Black Friday, then it was Black Friday, and then it was Cyber Monday, all in one. 11 notifications that I really didn't need. And again, if it was someone knocking on my door, I'd have the cops called by 9:42 a.m. What if we commit ourselves to sort of, having structured times for checking email, going on social media, watching TV and other various things? I know this might sound crazy. As a church, we try to practice. We only send out, if you sign up for our mailing list, another plug, we only send you 1 email a week. And we do that intentionally because we don't want to just fill your inbox and your life with noise and all the stuff. And our announcements are really important, you guys. But we commit to doing it once a week. Social media, how crazy would it be if we limited it or moderated or sort of observed how much we use it. That's all I'll say on that. TV, this one's interesting because I don't particularly watch that much TV a whole lot anymore with streaming and all that stuff. And now Netflix is killing all of us that like share our account 6 different ways. So I'm kind of mad about that because me and Desiree, we haven't paid for Netflix since we've been married, but we're starting next week. Here's what's interesting. We spend about 35 hours a week in front of a screen. Like that's almost full-time job worthy, right? 35 hours a week. I found this funny. When the CEO of Netflix was asked about competition from Prime and Apple TV and different things, he shrugged and said that their biggest competitor was sleep. So I'm not sure if that's arrogance or scary or both, but that's what he said. They said, I don't know. I just read CEO. I didn't look much more into it, but see, it feels like a perfect time for a reminder of an earlier quote in our series. What we give our attention to is the persons or people we become. Or how we spend our lives is how we spend our time is how we spend our lives. Or as John Mark Comer says, our time is our life and our attention is the doorway to our hearts. Number 12, single tasking. I love this because I'm the world's worst multitasker. But I actually read this week, it's not true, you know. No one can actually multitask and do 2 things well. Single tasking. I don't know why we try to multitask, and again, I'm guilty of having like 11 tabs open on my Internet Explorer. But we must remind that only God is omnipresent, all present. Only God is capable of doing these things. And it's impossible to be fully present to the moment, to our kids, to our families, to our siblings, to our neighbors, to ourselves, to God, unless we are fully present, single tasking, following, committing ourselves to Him in that moment. Number 13, walk slowly. I learned this one from Emerson. There's a playground it's about 2 minutes from our house. It takes about 20 to get there. Because he has to stop for every sight and every sound. Emerson has a speech delay, so he can't communicate with us yet. So if you see him and he doesn't talk to you, he just can't. But he stops and he notices every sign. And in a way, without even using words, he communicates to me the wonder of what he is beholding that us adults miss right before our own eyes. It's amazing what you see when it takes you 20 minutes to get somewhere that only takes 2. It's amazing. I call it wonder. I call it beholding what God wants us to see about our own lives. We miss the beauty of the world before our own eyes. So go for a walk this afternoon and walk slowly. I hope I see you. Let's all meet up at Manuel's River at 3 o'clock. No, I said confession was 3 o'clock. 4 o'clock, Manuel's River. Let's go for a slow walk together. All right, let's get a little more serious because I'm getting close to the end. Number 14, stay close to Jesus. And do whatever it takes to stay close to Him. This is going to look differently for all of us. But find your way. Find the ways in which you can stay close and draw near to His presence. Number 15, soak in the Word. It is so important. So important. Matthew 4:4, Jesus said, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Number 16, learn to pray. I didn't realize this, but the only thing that Jesus' disciples ever asked Him about while He was with them was, Lord, teach us to pray. And He did. He taught them to pray. Let Him teach you how to pray. Explore the different ways to prayer. Silence, solitude, intercession, petition, thanksgiving. So many ways to pray, and it is so much more than just stopping and having a quick conversation with God. Explore the different ways to pray. Number 17, journal. Someone writes, this slow art of writing your own life is grounding, a tether for the soul in the hurricane of the modern world. I said to my life group a couple weeks ago that one of the most important practices for me in the last sort of 3 to 4 months of my life has been taking just one time a week to sit down and journal and ask myself 4 questions. Pete Scazzaro calls it exploring the iceberg. What am I anxious about? What am I sad about? What am I angry about? But don't just stop there. What am I glad about? Gratitude is sort of the balance to offsetting those 3 things and grounding us in the moment. Journaling forces us to slow down. Number 18, meditation. Now, some people think that this is bad. I find it a little weird because Psalm 1:1-3 says, blessed is the one who does not walk in the step with the wicked or stand in the way that sinners take or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord and who meditates on His law day and night. And that person, their life, it's like a tree planted by streams of water which yields its fruit in season and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Meditate on the words of God. Don't just empty your mind, but fill it with the bread of life, with the words that is the bread to our souls, the good bread, Jesus calls it. Number 19, take a break. I would say vacation, but I also know that vacation is a very privileged thing, and some people aren't entitled to vacation. And I would say to you, take a break whenever, wherever you can, and however long that you can. It's interesting that they say people who study things like vacation, I want that job in my next life, but people who study things like vacation, they say that we need to take 1 week for every quarter, so 1 week every season, which is, again, really good if you have the privilege of 4 weeks paid vacation. I had to wait 5 years for that. But they say that happiness peaks at around day 8 of a vacation, which is really interesting because I always thought I need to run away for a long time and then I'll come back and be better. It's not true. Peaks around day 8. And the interesting thing is, as you read the Old Testament law, we see that the idea of vacations was a God sort of idea given to the people of Israel. The nation of Israel had 3 feasts per year that were set aside as a week-long Sabbath, 7 days to rest and worship. Usually a week-long festival that was really 8 days because on the front end was Sabbath, a day of rest, and on the back end was Sabbath, a day of rest. And interestingly enough, how modern science is saying 8 days, this vacation, this feast was 8 days. The last thing is this, and this sort of goes back to a series we did in the fall. Cook your own food and eat at your own table. Real food takes time because, well, it's real food. Worship team can come back. I think that's a first. So thank you for letting me feel the shame of that publicly. I mean, it sort of works. It fits. Cook your own phone and eat at your own table. Okay, now we're starting to sound like a cult. Okay. Real food takes time. Cooking your phone would probably take some time too, but we did an entire series on hospitality back in the fall. What we see in the life of Jesus. I knew people would move to tears today, laughing and whatnot. Jesus always spent time at the table with people. And one of the places in which we can practice presence in our lives is to be at the table with people in our lives. You'll begin to notice things about them you never noticed or maybe you've forgotten over the years. But it is so important to do this. So important. Again, don't take these 20 things as, okay, this week I'm going to tick this box and then that box. And I want you to make your own list. Figure out what works best for you. I think there's something we can all share in some of these things, especially the cooking your own phone part. But I will now double check all of my slides. I actually had them done early this week too. That's the crazy thing. But anyways, come back to it again and again. All these things. Because realistically, in 2 or 3 weeks, we're all going to forget all of the I'm So Tired series, and we're all going to feel so tired. Every single week, I'm like, why did I do a series on I'm So Tired? I feel like I'm tired because I'm talking about being tired all the time. So that's like a curse. But come back to this again and again, because at the heart of all these things, at the heart of the whole concept of slowing down and the whole concept of being exhausted is this thing that we have to slow down our lives. And what we'll discover, and this has been our prayer, is that while your body still may be tired, your soul may be full. Again, shameless plug for next week, fully alive. Come back next week. Don't settle to live, but fight to be alive. I know I've been long today, but I'm going to get Paul and team to come back. And I added a bonus point, actually, and I want us to just do one more thing today. And the bonus point is this: worship with your church family. And one of the things that we've been really convicted of, Pastor Greg and myself, over the last little while, is that in a very high-paced, busy, fast world, here's our conviction: we need a slower church. We need a church that slows down, that helps us come in here and not just with all the crazy energy from the week past and thinking about the 16 things that we have to do starting tomorrow, but that we wouldn't squander or miss out on these opportunities to worship with one another, to sing, to hear the voice of God, to embrace community, to be present with one another, to be attentive to one another, to be attentive with our own souls and our own lives. And again, we can do all these things outside of church, but there's something special about gathering with other people who share the same sort of ideas and beliefs. We're all journeying together towards the same things. And they say there's a connection between the speed of our lives and the health of our spirits. And we just want these times to be meaningful times to slow down together. I'm going to end this series with a scripture I've read already in this series, but it's Romans 12, 1, 2. And then we can sing whatever you want to sing this morning. I'm not coming back to the drums, just so you know. I'm exhausted. I'm so tired. It's going to be quiet. It's going to be slow. It's going to be intentional. If you got to leave, I know we try to honor your time as best we can. We're not going like on forever or anything. Just a couple minutes of slowing down. God can speak before the sermon. He can speak during it, and He can speak after. But hear this invitation from the Apostle Paul as he writes to the church in Rome. This is the Message paraphrase, very plain language. This is amazing. He says, so here's what I want you to do with God helping you. Because as soon as you try to do all these things in your own strength, it's going to fail. We're going to flop. We're going to fail. We cannot do it on our own. And maybe we just need to stop right there and ask for God's help in doing these things. He says, take your everyday, like you're driving and you're cooking off your phone and cooking off your food, and take your everyday ordinary life. You're sleeping, you're eating, you're going to work, you're walking around life, walking slowly walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. Be present. Be present. Be present to God. Be present to yourself. Be present with others. And you'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what He wants from you and quickly respond to it, unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity. On Facebook, just kidding. God brings the best out of you. He develops well-formed maturity in you. Let's take a moment. I'm going to get you to stand with us, and we're going to pray a simple prayer as we sing reflectively before we close. This is just a simple prayer. God, this is what we want to do, and we need your help. This is what we want, and we need your help. So let's do that together before we close this morning.
Reaching out for more. You're the promise, never failing. You are my reward. You are my reward. So I let go of all I have just to have all of you, and no matter what the cost, I will follow you. Jesus, everything I've lost, I have found in you. When I finally reach the end, I'll say, you are worth it all. Earthly treasures that will satisfy every longing for you, Jesus. Set this heart on fire. Set this heart on fire. So I let go of all I have just to have all of you. And no matter what the cost, I will follow you. Jesus, in you. When I finally reach the end, I'll say, you are worth it all. 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 When I'm there in your glorious presence, every knee is bowed before you. Hear the sound of heaven singing, you are worth it all. All the saints cry, holy, holy. Angels singing, worthy, worthy. Forever I will shout your praises. You are worth it all. When I'm there in your glorious presence, every knee is bowed before you. Hear the sound of heaven singing, you are worth it all. All the saints cry, holy, holy. Angels singing, worthy, worthy. Forever I will shout your praises. You are worth it all. You are worth it all. So I let go of all I have just to have all of you. And no matter what the cost, I will follow you. Jesus, everything I've lost, I have found in you. When I finally reach the end, I'll say, you are worth it all. You are worth it all. You are worth it all. You are worth it all.
So God, thank you for everything that you've done in our lives today. And I pray as we go today, we will be reminded that you go before us. And when we get ourselves into that situation this week, and we immediately wonder where you are, we'll have such a powerful reminder that you are with us. You go before us, behind us, above and below, all around us. So we pray we would not forget that this week. We ask this today in Jesus' name.